Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. Today, we're going to go over a video from Brian Netton, a Ashley Banfield video, and then we'll also go over one more from, I guess, Grizzly is what we'll do. And there's always Tony Bruschi out there too, but we'll see. But the first thing I want to talk about is, and this is going to be my monologue here, is some people were saying to me on Facebook and other places, oh, did that clerical error in June of 2025, did that trigger Dr. Michael McKee into doing this? And I don't really think it did. I don't think it did for several reasons. For one, I don't think he got anything from that clerical error anyway. Secondly, when it comes to narcissistic people and psychopaths, there doesn't need to be a trigger. The only trigger there needs to be is a loss of control. And then cruelty is a punishment for losing control. This is a concept I'm going to talk about with Dr. Salerno in a couple of days here. So he has a new book called Cruelty by Nature, and he goes over this, loss of control. And I agree with him. That's all that is needed in this. The only thing that's needed is for them to lose control. And he was probably nurturing this resentment for years, and it was giving him a twisted source of narcissistic supply. And this is the other part about it. Welcome there, Hot. I would agree. 99% sure no as well. Don't forget, hi there. It's Teresa. Welcome. And here's the other part about it too, right? Where, and no one wants to hear this part, but when you have an ex like Michael McKee, maybe not the best for them to be putting a public wedding video up. And I know you'd want to say, well, I don't want my past to define my present. I shouldn't have to live any differently than I normally would. And sure, I totally get that sentiment. But here's the thing. When it comes to someone like him, maybe it's best to keep that thing private. That's one thing I would recommend. If you have an ex like that, maybe not the best to do that. And you can say, well, that's not fair, or that's this, that's that. And you're right. That's not fair. But considering how it turned out, and we see how it turned out now, I mean, probably best to play it safe. And again, this is not to blame a victim here in any way. We're just trying to take what we can learn from this situation. And I would say, if you have an ex that you think is anything like Michael McKee, yeah, probably not the best to be putting wedding videos out there. That's just my take about it. The other thing I want to talk about before I begin here as well is there was someone saying to me today, and there's a fair amount of people who make this argument. They'll say, just because you're a narcissist doesn't mean you're abusive, or most people with personality disorders are not abusive. And this is something that I couldn't disagree more with. And these are the people that say, well, NPD is not a choice. And when you criticize narcissists, you are being ableist. And I just don't buy this argument at all, because if you break down what narcissism is, impairments in empathy, exploitative, controlling, having a grandiose sense of self, feeling entitled, all of that is going to look exactly like abusive behavior. It's going to be abusive behavior. So I don't like it when anyone tries to say that, well, just because they're a narcissist doesn't mean they're abusive, or personality disorders is not synonymous with abusive. And it's like, dude, you're missing the point. If you're a self-aware narcissist, how about this? Work on your own behaviors so no one would even confuse you with a narcissist. How about that? How about them apples? That's what I would say the best thing to do is, hey there, Ellie, how are you? So I just don't like that argument, because when it comes to talking about this topic, helping the victims is first and foremost. And I've even amended my stance where I think now it's best to be a little more black and white for them, especially in the beginning, because as sneaky and as coercively controlling as narcissists are, the nuance actually helps the narcissist in the beginning. It helps the abuser. And that's something that I can't allow. So yeah, black and white it is. Black and white it is, especially for the beginning, because it is really tricky. The narcissist can be extremely slippery. And they're going to be abusive. So anyone that tries to tell you, nope, not abusive, narcissist, not abusive, you have to wonder what their motives are. Are they a self-aware narcissist that's trying to manage the image of narcissism? Or are they going to say something like, oh, you are stigmatizing the disorder? And I would say the best way to not stigmatize a disorder if you're a narcissist is to stop acting like a narcissist. If you stop acting like a narcissist, no one's going to think you are. Right? That's the way you do it. You do the work. But what do we know that happens? Most of them don't do the work. Probably 99% of them don't do the work. And then that's it. So that's why we talk about it the way we do. And as this Michael McKee case proves, it can be life and death sometimes. Now, granted, Michael McKee, he might be more of a psychopath. But Nick Reiner, his emotionality, that meets up with the vulnerable narcissism / antisocial traits. Absolutely. I'm living the dream, Ellie. How about yourself? We're about to pop on to a Brian Etten video here. But that was my little preamble for today. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. I really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. I appreciate all the support. In this episode, I'm continuing to dig into the murder investigation involving Dr. Spencer Tepe and his wife, Monique. Monique's ex-husband has been charged with murdering Monique and Spencer, a man named Dr. Michael McKee. In this episode, I'm going to dive into some new information I've learned about what was going on in Dr. McKee's life before the murders, also why additional charges have now been added on. I'm digging into all of it, all the latest in this episode of Brian Etten Investigates. So more details are emerging in the murder of dentist Spencer Tepe and his wife Monique Tepe in Columbus, Ohio. It's such a tragic case. I know so many of us have been invested in this since really the beginning, since they were found dead. We're learning more.
And I want to put this comment up here because it's so accurate. Candy very accurately says narcissists don't need help. There's nothing wrong with them. That's what they think. Exactly right. They think the problem's always somebody else. So they don't even begin the process of change. And even the people that claim to be quote unquote self-aware narcissists, I see them criticizing how people talk about narcissism much more than they're doing their own work themselves. And don't even get me started on the creators that are self-aware narcissists. How does the self-aware narcissist get better when they are feeding their grandiosity online? I'll wait. I'll wait until someone comes up with an answer for that. Hello there, Ann.
About the abusive relationship Monique had with her ex-husband, Dr. Michael McKee, a surgeon. I'm going to have more on that in a minute because there's a lot of new details. And I also have my guest, criminologist, Dr. Casey Jordan, who's going to join me to really unpack some of this. So that's coming up a little later in the episode. But Dr. McKee has officially been indicted now in the murders. There was a grand jury, and there is now a 5-count indictment, and it includes 4 counts of aggravated murder and 1 count of aggravated burglary. So these are no longer just charges from police. There has now been a grand jury, and the prosecutor is officially now in charge of the case. McKee will be extradited back to Ohio this week. He should be in court at the end of the week, so I'll keep you guys posted on that. According to the indictment, McKee used a gun equipped with a muffler or suppressor. That's the way they described it, a muffler or suppressor, when investigators say he went.
And this is what we heard in the beginning, right? That there was a silencer. I forget which person said that, but I remember hearing this, and it would make sense. It would make sense that no one called the police. It would make sense that there wasn't more of a ruckus, but there was the person that said this happened at 3:52 a.m., but no other ruckus. And you would also think if there was a loud noise, the kids would wake up and start crying, right? As gruesome as a thought that is, but that didn't happen, or at least it doesn't seem like it did.
Into the couple's home and shot both Monique and Spencer. And the police chief says that shell casings found at the scene connect back to a gun found at McKee's residence. Now, in terms of what was happening in McKee's life leading up to the murders, there were professional issues that have now come out. There was a lawsuit filed in 2024 in Nevada when he was working for a surgical group there, and it accuses a physician's assistant at the practice of inserting a catheter incorrectly, and almost 9 inches of the catheter, according to the lawsuit, was left inside the patient's body. So Dr. McKee was named in that lawsuit because he was responsible for training and supervising the physician's assistant, according to the lawsuit. And what's interesting is they apparently tried serving McKee 9 times. When I say serving, if you're sued, you get served with a lawsuit. They have.
And what does that sound like? It sounds like a narcissistic person allergic to accountability. Because how do you know someone's allergic to accountability? They'll break out in excuses, blame shifting, lying, gaslighting, antagonism, moving the goalposts, playing the victim. But that's how you know someone is allergic to accountability. And in his case, you just completely avoid it.
To come and they have to serve you with the lawsuit in person. And they tried 9 times and could not find Dr. McKee. They went to his address. No one ever came to the door. They went to his old surgical practice in Las Vegas, and there was a doctor there that said that Dr. McKee just disappeared. So this is a little bit of insight into what may have been going on with Dr. McKee before the murders. The police chief in Columbus, Ohio, said officially now that the murderers were an act of domestic violence. Monique's brother-in-law says she just had to get away from McKee. Apparently within the family, this was a known thing that she just had to get away from him. He said, myself and many others were well aware kind of the negative impact that he had on her and the abuse that he put her through, the torment, that's the word he used, the torment that he put her through. She was willing to do anything to get out of there. A friend of Monique said she would say she thought he would never leave her alone for the rest of her life. And remember, they had been divorced for 8 years. Okay, the divorce happened 8 years ago, and we still don't know exactly what sparked him to 8 years later come and kill his ex-wife Monique and her new husband.
And again, there didn't need to be a spark. Some people are saying, oh, this clerical error last year, that's what set him off. No, the only thing that was needed to set him off was a loss of control. And that is such an egregious affront to them. They'll do anything they can to get back in control. And at the very worst, they will end the lives of others because they'll say, well, if I can't have you and control you, no one can. So I will control your end of life. That's what I'll do. So that's what I would say. Now, the one thing I would do differently if I were the Teppies, and again, I understand where people would say, yeah, we shouldn't have to do anything differently. It's not fair. And I would say, you're right. It isn't fair, but it's about protecting yourselves. And I would say, don't put a public wedding video out there when you have an ex like Michael McKee. If anything might have bothered him, that might have. But again, even that, it wasn't even necessary, right? Just the loss of control was enough. I want to stress that.
Spencer, who is a dentist, by the way. Something else I'm going to ask Dr. Jordan about in a minute. The couple's 2 children, a 4 and a 1-year-old, they were found unharmed in the house, which is just a heartbreaking part of all of this. Spencer's cousin, Audrey Mackey, says the 4-year-old recently said goodbye to her mommy and daddy. The children, they are now living with extended family. The couple's 1-year-old son, who family believes was likely the one crying because he couldn't get out of his crib. Remember when the coworkers and friends were showing up at the house for the wellness check, and they heard one of the kids crying inside, and the cousin says that was likely the 1-year-old, basically stuck in his crib because it's awful to say, but because his parents had been shot and killed in the house. But the family says the 1-year-old likely too young to really process his parents' deaths. According to family members, it's unfortunate because they will never get to know their parents. And the cousin said, quote, maybe the eldest one might hopefully remember her parents it's very tragic. So again, I just think in all of this, I'm going to put the GoFundMe link below again. I've been trying to do that on all the videos that I do involving this case. But while we continue to go through the investigation, and obviously there's going to be a lot that comes out now that Dr. McKee has been arrested, maybe he may end up going to trial. We'll have to wait and see. But while we continue to follow that, I just think it's important to remember that there are these kids left behind. I want to play you some of Monique.
And we're going to skip this because there's some music we're not going to listen to in there. And we've already watched this part anyway.
Dr. Jordan, we've spoke about this case before. The first thing I want to ask you about is this new information that's come out that Dr. McKee was using a silencer when he killed Monique and Spencer, according to police. What do you make of that?
You know, Brian, it shows a lot of foresight and planning. And that is an add-on that you do not need just to go to the shooting range for target practice. I mean, you get a silencer or a suppressor when you want to kill someone. And also, if you want to fire multiple shots, which also increases your risk of being hurt, you want to kill.
And that's not exactly true. I mean, yes, silencers are definitely used for crimes. But people may go to the gun range and to protect their hearing, they might use a silencer, or farmers might use a silencer to not scare the other animals on the farm. So yeah, it can raise an eyebrow, a silencer, but it's not a guarantee a crime was committed. Remember that.
Someone and not be hurt, maybe by the children or the baby down the hall or the dog who might start barking or the neighbors who might hear shots. So, I mean, the fact that you go to the trouble to have a silencer on your gun, very, very damning evidence. And it also might suggest that he anticipated that with the first shot, the other person in the room might awake and attack him. And so the silencer might buy him extra time. And by all accounts, from what we know.
Yes, Brian does seem partial to the blondes. Brian's a blonde himself. But where's Jennifer Coffenhofer? She's a brunette. She's pretty well informed, but not on Brian Etten's channel.
Know about the crime scene. It looks like Monique was shot in the chest once, and possibly that was his first target. Spencer awoke because Spencer was shot a number of times. Perhaps Spencer was trying to fight back, but the silencer would have made it possible to get out of the house without people noticing.
Could it also play into premeditation because they've now made them aggravated murder charges? They've said premeditation. Could they use the silencer to try and prove that he went and bought a silencer?
Absolutely. I mean, that shows the planning and forethought. Nobody just accidentally goes into a gun shop and buys a silencer unless they plan to use it. And there is no logical reason to have one on your gun unless you plan to actually harm somebody with it.
Again, this isn't exactly true. It can be noteworthy. Someone might be doing it for crime, but there are people that want to protect their hearing at the gun range, and farmers, like I said, they might use one to not scare the animals. So it's not quite as black and white as she's making it out to be here.
And keep it quiet.
You and I talked last time about the shell casings that were found at the scene in the house, which you were saying were going to be very, very important. It turns out now the police chief says those shell casings have connected back to Dr. McKee's gun, which they found in his residence. Are you surprised that he kept the murder weapon like that? I mean, couldn't he have thrown it out of the car or thrown it in a lake? Or, you see that in other cases.
Could he have? Not only could he have, should have, except I'm glad. Listen, the short answer to your question, Brian, why would he still have the gun on him, is because he is an idiot.
I mean, honestly, there is no other explanation there. Are you that he's entitled or has a God complex and he thinks, yeah, either I'm not going to get caught or I just don't care if I am. It's got to be one or the other. You would think you would try to clean up the crime scene. You would think you would try to hide the weapon. But in his case, he did neither. I mean, of all the things that you would think, wouldn't those be two big things? I don't know. But hey, as far as justice is concerned, It's good that he didn't.
And I don't mean to be unkind, but he is natively intelligent. He's smart enough to make it through medical school and become a surgeon. And yet with that comes a certain God complex we often talk about with surgeons, particularly. Don't beat me up, surgeons. But you know that many surgeons, because the work they do is the fine line very often between life and death, they fancy themselves incredibly intelligent. But with that comes a certain amount of arrogance. And in this particular case, I would think that even though he was highly intelligent, the arrogance got in the way and made him overconfident. And the overconfidence is like, they're not going to come for me. They're never going to think it's me. Why do I need to get rid of this gun? I like this gun. I paid for this gun. Why should I throw it in the lake? And, from the best laid plans, the most brilliant murder plans, you're going to make 10 mistakes at least. And keeping the gun was his most obvious one, and leaving DNA at the scene.
When I saw him in court, my first impression was he just looked like emotionless, but also kind of like he didn't have much fight left in him, if that makes any sense. Is there any chance, do you think, that he just has given up at this point, didn't care to hide the murder weapon because I'm probably going to get caught anyway, and let's just see how this plays out?
So, Sherry, the reason I made that the title is just yesterday, even though it's not new, people were pointing to that and saying, this is why it happened. There was a clerical error and things got sent to him. And that's just not true. Nothing got sent to him. There was a clerical error where things got opened, but it didn't do anything. So I wanted to set the record straight and say, no, that's not what did it. All it takes for a narcissist or a psychopath to do something like this is losing control. That's it. And I mentioned how the wedding video certainly doesn't help. But it's losing control. That's really the thing.
There had to be something, Brian, in his subconscious that made him very aware of the incredibly high risk of this crime that he perpetrated, because he's going to be an obvious suspect. Of course, we always look at the ex-husband anytime a wife is killed. And it's a bit of a tug of war in his reasoning, like in the little reasoning brain chamber he has. He's like, no one will ever suspect me. I'm a fine, upstanding vascular surgeon with no criminal history. And, that's the overconfidence. And it's at a tug of war with the logical fear and the assessment of risk, which you would think he would be good at. But in the end, he knew that the chances were very high that he would be questioned and even caught. And in the end, the overconfidence in the tug of war won out. And this is probably fed by the fact that we've learned a bit more about him that shows he was on a downward spiral at work. He had malpractice suits where he was named. His life was unraveling. He didn't have a happy marriage. He didn't have beautiful children. He didn't have a lovely golden doodle. And I think that in his effort to scapegoat his misery and his depression, he focused on his ex-wife. And it could have been anybody in the scapegoat world, but Monique was an easy target because she was so happy and living.
Because she was the one that he lost control of. Right? And if he, God forbid, if he saw her happy in that relationship, the envy would be times 10. And this is a topic we go over too, right? Where once you get out of an abusive relationship, it might be tempting to show the narcissistic person how good you're doing. And this is an extreme example why you shouldn't do that. But what I say the reason you shouldn't do it is if you want to show them how good you're doing, it's kind of showing them that you still care what they think a little bit. When you completely unsubscribe from their distorted version of reality, you do what is best for you, regardless of what they think or feel. That's what I would say. Right? That's how you know you're unsubscribed. You do what's best for you, and that's it. You don't put it through the lens of, oh, I wonder what my ex would think about this. That shows you're thinking about them. So when we're moving forward, you don't do that. Now, the caveat to that is this, being safe. So maybe if you have someone as severe as Michael, maybe you don't put a wedding video out for the public. Maybe that's the only thing I can think of.
Such a different life with her new husband than she ever had with him. So, I mean, the bottom line is, did he think he was going to get caught? Not consciously, but subconsciously. He had to know that it was extremely likely and that he would be the number one suspect. And I think to a certain extent, maybe he didn't care.
Do you think this came out of nowhere after 8 years, or do you think they had some kind of communication and saw each other? Because like you mentioned, we've learned more, and there are friends now of hers who have come forward and said that she still feared him. She still thought about him.
We will probably find that out through a big, deep dive on their digital media. If he had made phone calls to her or texted her or emailed her, that will surface. It's too early in the game to know. But to the extent that she's watching his social media, which she probably does because she lives in fear of him, she wants to know where he is and what he's doing and if he's happy, what's going on at work, because she's afraid if he goes off the deep end, he might come for her, as her friends have confirmed. And the bottom line is he's watching her social media. And I know she can block him, but come on, there's 1,000 ways around that. They probably still had mutual friends in common, and he could check in with a friend who would show her, her Instagram and her beautiful, happy family and all that sort of thing. I'm sure he kept constant tabs on her and very likely even physically stalked her around the house or cased that house. This was planned. He didn't just jump in the car that night and decide to do it.
Yeah, it was very planned. I would not be surprised one bit if there was in-person stalking or cyber stalking. He wasn't doing it from his own social media because he didn't have any social media. He might have had burner accounts. That's a possibility. And here's the other thing. A lot of people who are tech savvy, they know more than law enforcement. And law enforcement is way behind when it comes to cyber stuff. They just are. And so it's really unfortunate. But I think it might have been in-person stalking too, because we still don't know how he got in the house. I think one of the ways would be with binoculars or something, zooming in on the code. Because chances are she didn't use an old password that he would even think to guess. I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think she would say, let me use a password from back in the day, and it would be something Michael can guess. No, certainly not. So I think maybe he was spying and zoomed in and saw it. That's a possibility.
He got the gun. He got the silencer. He drove down. There was a lot of forethought in this. So, the bottom line is we don't know if they communicated directly, but I can guarantee you she was never out of his mind. And so he was communicating with her in his mind and sowing the seeds of bitterness and resentment over her happiness.
When you say he may have stalked the house, how can they figure out if he did that, the investigators? Will they be able to, I guess it's like, I'm thinking about how I had to go through tolls or cameras or...
All of that, plus the surveillance cameras that are on the streets in that area, one of which picked up a figure in a back alley near the house, a block or two away, which by all accounts we think was probably him. It's not yet confirmed. But they will go through thousands of hours of video footage looking for any sign of his car or his person and presence.
And I would guess it was him walking in that alley. I think so. If you compare and contrast him in court versus walking in that back alley, it looks pretty damn similar.
Determine whether or not he had really come around and sat. One of the questions that people still ask is, how did he know the code, assuming he got in that way to their digital keypad? And there's ways you can do that. With a telephoto lens, you can just watch somebody walk in the front door and parked across the street and see what numbers they push. From my 2 cents, I suspect that the digital code, if Monique set it up when they renovated that house, was probably the same digital code that she had when she lived with her ex-husband, maybe her birthday or her zip code or something like that. And
yes, we reported that the other day. That is confirmed, actually, that the walking alley person was Michael McKee.
Seems like a Hail Mary pass to just show up and not know the code. But this is something that is still nagging on all of us. How did he get into that house?
Yeah, no forced entry. We still don't know. I've heard a couple of theories too about whether the kids may have been locked in a room, or whether he may have locked the door to where he allegedly killed Monique and Spencer, maybe to keep the 4-year-old out. So we're still trying to get. The police haven't released very much officially, but we do know there was a grand jury, and there's now 4 counts of aggravated murder. Do you know why 4? Because you would think like 2, because two victims.
Okay, 2 murders, but 2 different, what we call the corpus delicti, which means the combination of criminal intent, criminal act, and concurrence. Now, just follow me here. He broke into this house or entered this house with the intent to commit a felony. Okay, that's the burglary. Doesn't have to be a larceny. The felony could be the murder. Now, they're expected the defense attorney might say he came over to talk to Monique. He didn't plan to kill her, or he came in and he was going to steal stuff, but he wasn't going to kill anybody. And then somebody surprised him and he shot them. But he didn't plan to kill anybody. That was just ancillary to the burglary. There was no forethought. So that's one set of charges. And in a nutshell, Brian, they are trying to, it's a preemptive strike, a fail-safe, in case the most logical explanation, which is that he planned it, there was criminal intent, there was calculation and design, I think is the way that they phrase it in that particular jurisdiction. In case the jury doesn't believe that he calculated it and designed it, the intent to murder, they've got the burglary as a backup, because murdering in the commission of a burglary is a whole different set of murder charges. In other words, they could be found guilty of one set of those murder charges or even both.
Makes sense. You mentioned some of his professional issues. There's now this lawsuit that's come out of Nevada that he's involved in. Apparently, he was supervising a physician's assistant who left a pretty large catheter in someone. And the lawyer has come forward that was trying to sue Dr. McKee and said that he was having such a hard time finding him, that he tried serving him 9 times, that they went to his old place that he worked in Nevada, and they said that he just packed up and disappeared. And this was all before, in the years before the murders. Do you think that could have anything to do anything? I mean, is that important to the investigation?
Well, to me, it just supports the idea that this doctor's life was unraveling.
And one thing I didn't mention here is that I didn't mention this possibility, but when maybe Dr. Tepe was letting the dog out, that's maybe when Michael McKee got in. That's a possibility.
I'm sorry, toughen up, Buttercup. When you're a doctor, you're going to get sued. It's why you have malpractice insurance. But this is a man who seems to run from his problems instead of facing them head on. You've got insurance, let them deal with it. Mistakes do happen. Under the captain of the ship doctrine in law, in tort law, because he was in charge of the physician assistant, made the mistake, he is the guy who is liable and culpable. And he probably doesn't think that's fair, and he disagrees with the law and doesn't want to be sued. So, I mean, the fact that that the lawyers tried to serve him 9 times and he ducked out and managed to evade them every one of those times, it shows that he just is a man who shirks responsibility. He thinks he can run from his problems, that he can outrun his problems, that they won't catch up with him, instead of just saying, all right, this is going to be tough, but I'm going to grab the bull by the horns and I'm just going to face it head on. And if that is his character, if that is his personality, to, blame everybody else and feel like he is the victim of a witch hunt, he will be looking for a scapegoat for his misery. And it's compounding. It's compounding daily. His problems at work, his wife left him and divorced him and is having a wonderful, happy life with her new husband. Who knows what else was going on in his life? But in the end, he decided, we see this a lot. And you asked me earlier, do you think he meant he knew he would be caught? There's always this thing they don't want to be caught, but their life is going down the toilet, so to speak. And they decide that if it's going to be bad, they might as well find a scapegoat and take vengeance on this entity, in his case, Monique and her husband, who...
Because remember, when it comes to narcissistic people, it's certainly not their fault. And you spend enough time around them, they'll start blaming you for everything going wrong in their life. Even if you're not with them. Just the fact that you left. Oh, Monique left me. That's why things are so terrible for me. But in reality, he was still a surgeon, making probably hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. He's just a personality disordered dope. That's what that is. There's no, think about that. You're doing well in life by any other metric, but in your own head, that's what you're thinking about, you're a dope. No, there's no other way to put it.
He wants to blame for all of his problems, and it's kind of like a last act on your way out of town. If he knows that his life is really kind of over, especially professionally, he may decide to do something incredibly rash, like.
And that's a possibility too, where if he thinks his professional life is coming down and going to be crashing down, yeah, okay, maybe you become more likely to say, screw it. I don't necessarily think that's what was going on. But someone else in the chat mentioned that Michael's ex was on Surviving the Survivor. That is fascinating if so. Apparently that just came out a few hours ago. I'll try to see if I can find that next.
Kill his ex-wife and her husband because whatever, he's going to go to prison. He doesn't really care. Life is over for him as he knows it. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a lot of bad stuff going on in his life when he committed this alleged crime.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about him as a doctor, spending so much time, apparently helping people, doing surgeries to help people. I mean, and you walk in, let's say you have the plan to go kill your ex-wife and her new husband, but you walk in and you realize that there's kids there. You must have known before, but then when you see them, like, how does that not make you change your mind?
Yeah. Compartmentalization in a nutshell. I'm sure he knew the children were there, and I'm sure that his plan was to not harm the children. I mean,
Again, the way Brian even asked the question, it's almost like you're expecting him to be a normal person. Just the very fact that he's there to kill Dr. Tepe and Monique proves he's not a normal person and lacks empathy. So, again, it's a miracle he didn't do anything to the kids, but to even ask the question, oh, how doesn't just knowing they're there stop you? Well, you don't have a conscience and you don't have empathy. So you just don't even stop to think about it. It just doesn't even enter the equation for you. So it's very just self-centered.
Most emboldened murderer will, unless they're a professional hitman, seriously, will have a soft spot. There's a rule. You don't kill children. It's just understood. And his beef was with his ex-wife. And by virtue of the fact that she had a brand new, young, handsome dentist, doctor husband, boy, did he feel replaced. And, she upgraded because she got a man who was loving and wonderful, the opposite of everything he was, apparently. So his beef was very compartmentalized. I hate my ex-wife and I hate the man who makes her happy. I want to destroy their marriage, but the children are ancillary to that. I don't kill children. The wonderful news is that the youngest is far too young to have a memory of this. And the extended family who are caring for them believe that they witness nothing, remember nothing. And the sad thing is they will never remember their parents.
Yeah, it's sad to think about because they're so young. That's definitely the part that gets at me, just thinking about them. What do you think, just based on what we know so far, he'll do moving forward? I mean, is he going to drag this out? Is he going to fight these charges?
They always start that way. And, we have a saying in criminology, especially if you do criminal defense work like I do, and I've done murder trials, Brian, there is no atheist in a foxhole, which means they always are strong until the last minute. And then they are like, yeah, I can't do this. This isn't worth it. Finally, the overconfidence will disintegrate and the rule of logic will take over, and it will basically, like, you're going down. Do you really want the spectacle of a trial and a media circus following this case forever? Do you really want the world to know all the details and hate you forever? Or do you just want to go quietly into the darkness? Koberger, he stayed until the very end after they lost all their motions. He was like, all right, I think I'll take a plea deal now. And I think you'll see exactly the same kind of thing happen with Monique's ex-husband. I think that he's going to toe the line until the very edge. And when he realizes that the evidence is overwhelming, he's going to take a plea.
Well, and like with Koberger, it's hard at this point to imagine like what a defense would be. I mean, if they've connected him to the gun, they probably have DNA now. You know what I mean? It's hard to imagine what his defense could be.
He can't get rid of the gun with a silencer. Okay, the DNA puts him there, but he could come up with all kinds of ridiculous scenarios of why he was there. She called him there, they came to have a discussion, whatever. I mean, we just saw in the Walsh case in Boston. I mean, people come up with crazy scenarios all the time that try to give them an exit plan. He could come up with a scenario of why he was there, but not why he was there with a gun that was armed with a silencer. There is not a logical juror who will go, you went there to chat with her and ended up killing her by accident? Come on. So I don't know what his plan is. He can try for mistaken identity, but DNA is the nail in the coffin there. So between the gun and the DNA, I don't see how he's going to beat this rap. And the overconfident guy, in the tug of war is going, I'm going to take it to the very edge. And he will. But I think at some point logic will step in and you will see a plea deal.
What kind of a profile do you see with him in terms of personality? Like, is he just such an egomaniac that he thought he could get away with this?
Well, as I've been describing him as overly confident. So we could call him egomaniac, megalomaniac. I mean, I have not seen or heard a word from this person in person, so we don't diagnose. But I mean, clearly there's a lot of antisocial personality traits going on here. And I hate to make mass generalizations about doctors and surgeons, but there's been a lot of literature on their personality traits. And, arrogance and narcissism is very common among physicians, and it's born from the fact that they do hold the fine line between life and death in their hands.
And we've gone over that before, right? Surgeons in particular, most likely to be cluster B and psychopaths. But narcissists in general, any position that has power, status, or a built-in level of control or authority over others, they are going to gravitate to. Things like social media influencers, police officers, other kinds of professors, people that have control, or even therapists, right? But you think also priests, think also lawyers, think also politicians, think also business owners, think also celebrities and rock stars, all of them likely to have narcissists gravitate towards being them.
But surgeons particularly, they're not so much in the healing practice as in the cutting practice. And they make mistakes. They do get sued. I think that he is absolutely blown away that he has a malpractice suit on himself this early in the career. But, when it comes down to his personality, I hate to say it's so common. It is common across the board, especially with serial killers. But this is just a one-time thing for him. And it's power and control. When he feels that his life is spinning out of control, and doctors are all about extreme discipline and extreme control. That is how you become a surgeon, a physician, by studying hard, putting your nose to the grindstone, excluding all else in the interest of your profession. And then when you arrive, you have a personality, not just a profession, which is paramount with power and control. When you feel your life slipping away, perhaps because of the malpractice lawsuit, perhaps because his wife dumped him, who knows, maybe he was in financial ruin. He may have all kinds of things going on that we don't even know about, dumped by a girlfriend, lost money gambling, who knows? But when we find power control-oriented killers losing their sense of control, that's when they do completely uncharacteristic things.
She's speaking about language, about the power and control and losing control. Good work.
Things like perhaps take the life of their ex-wife. It's all alleged, innocent until proven guilty. But based on the evidence we have, he's good for it.
As always, I really appreciate Dr. Casey Jordan for talking with me. She always has such valuable insight.
Dr. Casey Jordan's her name. So chat, I'm going to do something a little different now because this thing about his ex-girlfriend speaking out is pretty big. So I want to update even my thumbnail to include that in the thumbnail here. So I have to exit out to do this for a second. So hold on. Let's see here. How can you find out the demographics of a video that you watched? I'm not sure you'll be able to see it. You can try to look in their info, but it might not include it, honestly. So hold on one second. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to exit out of this. So, but I'll be right back in 5 minutes because I want to make sure I can update this because this is bigger. This is bigger than the clerical error thing. Yeah, I'm back, but I'm going to go away again for 1 second here, Danielle. So hold on. I'll be up back and again in 2 minutes.